This is the Middle-earth philosopher, where I talk about ideas, people, and relationships within Middle-earth and try to examine them from a philosophical point of view that would have existed in that world. Feanor was right. I talk a lot about the character of Feanor in my videos where I'm discussing anything on the philosophy of the Elves. And objectively, it's because he's arguably the most interesting of any of them. Now, why do I think that? Well, put simply, it's because of the contradictions that he embodies. He's immortal like all of his species, powerful like many of the nobles of his kind, and has great knowledge and wisdom when it comes to the art of creating and smith-making. But, at the same time, he's egotistical, arguably a narcissist, has zero humility, and towards the end of his life as High King, gave zero fucks about anything or anyone that contradicted him or got in the way of his revenge against Morgoth. Whether they were elf, Valar, or human, it didn't matter. On a side note, I'm not sure if you knew about the dwarves or not, but there you are. He was obsessive, charismatic, but a horrible leader and a horrible High King on top of that, having earned the curse of the Valar on his entire family and clan and anyone who allied with them. And arguably, next to Morgoth, is almost single-handedly responsible for the deaths that happened during the closing centuries of the First Age. And yet, as I said at the beginning of the video, Feanor was right. Partially. So, what gives? Well, first, let me say this. I'm not referring to the kinslayings at Alqualande. Rather, I'm referring to certain events where he said or did something that fulfilled an unknown purpose even unto himself at times. So the first instance where Feanor was right was in the creation of the Silmaril jewels. You already know what they are, I'm guessing, since you're here. But if not, put simply, there are 3 jewels that contain the light of the primordial trees of Valinor before Morgoth destroyed them. So yeah, they're pretty important. Important because Valinor was at its most perfect when the trees existed, because it was all that was left of the original Middle-earth as it was intended to be, what the Valar created according to the original plans of the Iluvatar before Morgoth destroyed that too. So yeah, corruption and destruction are Morgoth's thing. The trees of Valinor were created as a response to this, as a last-ditch attempt at the preservation of what could be saved from this ideal world. But with their destruction, also passed the last tangible and visible element of this primeval world. And as the Valar have said, it could not be recreated even by them. So all that was left of it was their memory and the jewels that were made before they were destroyed. Feanor, through his miraculous genius and the unknown abilities that existed in him, had made the jewels so that they somehow contained the essence and the light of those trees, a vision of that primeval world that could affect the world around them. And that was the only way possible that Valinor could potentially be fully restored, and even that wasn't a guarantee. Yavanna says that Feanor may have created them out of some sense of foresight or vision of what was about to happen, but he created the Silmarils with such hyper-secrecy, only Uru knows really what happened with that, what really inspired him to do it. But, whether indirectly or directly, Feanor was right in making the Silmarils, even though they led to such tragedy. The second reason why Feanor was right was after the Battle of Alqualande, he and the Noldor were confronted by Mandos, branded outlaws and exiles for killing their own kind, and the Noldor were shook by this. They were already guilt-ridden by the blood they've shed at this point. But, to some of them, it was just too much to be cursed by the gods. Finarfin, Feanor's half-brother, who was never close to him at all, forsakes the new war and his half-brother, returning back to Valinor with his faction and getting their forgiveness for that. Feanor's other half-brother, Fingolfin, stays with his faction, but they begin to doubt his kingship and his leadership because of the actions at Alqualande. Feanor is neither scared, humbled, or shaken, even in the face of the Valar Mandos. Instead, in what could arguably be his most supreme act of arrogance at this point, he says directly to Mandos that the Valar are still cowards for not having done anything about Morgoth, and that despite the curse that's been placed upon him, the Noldor would do deeds that would be remembered throughout time. And, more than that they too would eventually follow him to Middle-earth for war against Morgoth. And, in this, he was correct, though not in the way that he thought it would be. The Noldor do survive the Beleriand Wars, thrive during the Second Age, and though slowly departing towards the end of the Third Age, do become legends to the elves that stay and to the humans that know their stories. More so, both the Valar and even Finarfin and the Noldor who forsook him do eventually go to war against Morgoth during the War of Wrath at the apocalyptic close of the First Age. So, once again, Feanor was right. The third reason that Feanor was right is actually rather tragic, but is also matter-of-fact correct. Feanor binds his sons to retrieve the Silmarils at any cost after his death. And, though this is not achieved for centuries, with actually only one Silmaril being retrieved, but that being not by the Noldor, and it still being denied to the sons of Feanor because it was being withheld within the Girdle of Melian, and later on was taken back to Valinor by Eärendil, the surviving sons, Maglor and Maedhros, do eventually fulfill this oath by retrieving the jewels after the War of Wrath, even though they killed more elves to do it. And yes, while the Silmarils do reject both of them because of how many people they've killed in order to do it, the fact remains that Feanor's oath was fulfilled, albeit tragically. So, again, and in this case, unfortunately, Feanor was right. And lastly, the way Feanor was right, during his trial and after Morgoth had destroyed the trees, Feanor several times chastises the Valar for their inaction against their renegade peer. Through the Silmarillion, it says that they were trying to plan their response to Morgoth telepathically during this time. Yet, this being unknown to Feanor, he still rebukes them, and his rebukes tend to hit home regarding certain aspects of the Valar's behavior. Primarily speaking, that being their retreat from Middle-earth after the destruction of the paradise of Almarin at the beginning of time. Even though this understandably traumatizes them and it took a lot of effort and power just to save what they could, they still chose to leave the rest of Middle-earth in darkness after they had done this. Granted, some of them did some actions like hunting down evil beasts in Middle-earth and trying to plant seeds of further creations down the line, but overall, the Valar pretty much were inactive east of the sea and focused all their care, love, and efforts west of the sea in Valinor, all that remained of Almarin. And this unfortunately leaves all the races in Middle-earth kind of to their own devices and to the creatures and evil influences of Morgoth. So that includes the dwarves, the elves, and eventually humans as well. All this happening because the Valar had chosen to stay west in their home in Valinor. And arguably, this persists even after Alqualande, where when they place the damnation and the curse upon the Noldor, they also choose to have that affect anyone who allies with them. So therefore, people and races who are not even aware of what happened at Alqualande were going to be affected by the ramifications of it as well, because of a choice the Valar had made in how they were going to enact their punishment. Moreover, it also left Middle-earth to the potential rule of Morgoth had it not been for the Noldor and the Edain that kept him hemmed in the northwest. Doomed though it may have been, though to be honest with you, I don't entirely believe that because of what the Silmarillion says about the Battle of Outnumbered Tears, but the War of Morgoth kept him focused on that region of Middle-earth and unable to truly rule over the rest of the world as he desired, even though there were still influences. Perhaps the final proof for this particular point is also more questionable because, unfortunately, I'm drawing from memory, despite my best efforts to track down the source of where I read this from. I don't know if this was something that Christopher Tolkien had said, or if it was something the author himself had said, but what I had read was that in an earlier version of the Silmarillion, the Valar were chastised by Iluvatar for allowing Morgoth to go apeshit for so long before finally doing something about it. Even though they hesitated out of fear of damaging the world any further, it was through this lack of faith in Iluvatar himself that he would even actually allow Morgoth to destroy so much that the Valar were inactive, and in this, they should have stopped him sooner. Now, if anyone knows about this particular note or reference, or thinks it's wrong and has proof of that, please let me know in the comments below, because I would like to know either way. That being said though, if this is actually true, then it further serves the point that Feanor was again correct, in that the Valar shared partial blame at least for everything that happened to Feanor, his family, and the rest of Middle-earth. Still, I think that these are pretty strong points to the nuances of the philosophy of Feanor's rants and actions. Was he moved by a greater power, as some have theorized? Did he have visions that only showed partial truths, allowing for misinterpretation, which led to the creation of Silmarils and further inspired his other actions? Or was he just that damn lucky to be in the quote-unquote right place at the right time, to do/say what he did? I definitely think that there's more than meets the eye that's happening in the internal mechanisms and influences behind Feanor and what he thinks and does and acts and what his instincts are. It's almost like he's some sort of secret agent of the will of the Iluvatar to say and enact certain things that instigate the powers in Middle-earth into further action and to kind of create circumstances down the line. Ultimately, we'll never know. But regardless, it's safe to say, I think, that Feanor was right. Sort of.